Alright, so my topic today is psychosocial safety climate in education industry. So for this year, year of 2020, it is actually quite common, or we will say familiar with COVID-19 because it happened across the globe. So particularly in Malaysia, coronavirus is actually an infectious disease caused by a newly discovered coronavirus. So the World Health Organization, or WHO, has declared coronavirus or COVID-19 as an pandemic status at 11 March of 2020. So in order to curb the crisis of COVID-19 in Malaysia, the Malaysia's government has declared a movement control order, or we name it as MCO in Malaysia, starting from 18 March 2020 until 3rd March of 2020. So this MCO, or we name it as movement control order, is not really a lockdown of the country. It is more on a movement restriction. However, the eligible services are still available, alright, in the country. So in view of the economy development of certain sector, starting from 4th May 2020 up to 9 June 2020, the government has revised MCO into CMCO, or we name it as Conditional Movement Control Order, in order to ensure the survival of certain economic sector. And in view with the improvement of COVID-19 situations in Malaysia, then the government once again revised CMCO into RMCO, or we name it as Recovery Movement Control Order, which actually started from 10 June 2020 up to 31st August 2020. That is to say, we Malaysian at this time being is actually under the stage of Recovery Movement Control Order. So thanks to the frontliner as well as the entire Malaysians who give their best to curb this issue. However, we as an educator, of course, we are greatly impacted by the effects of COVID-19. So what happened, especially in Malaysian education due to COVID-19? So basically, all education industry or institution in Malaysia are forced to shut down since the start of MCO, which means 18 March of 2020. So, and this shutdown is actually quite sudden, and these changes are not really in our hand, or we are prepared for that. So in order to ensure the continuous of delivery as well as the assessments of the students, so the Malaysia educators are actually striving their best to actually bring the physical classroom delivery into online platform delivery. So since we do not have much option in order to go for delivery, so Ministry of Higher Education Malaysia has instructed particularly all higher learning institutions to continue implementing online teaching until the end of 2020. This is because the government is worried that we have second wave of coronavirus infection. Therefore, if we are possible, we will do it in online learning institution that to go with the online platform. And that's to say that our educators' workload increases. And why we say that it increases? Because previously, educators' workloads before COVID-19, their job demands are actually very complicated or complex. And with COVID-19 impact, it is even more workload to come in. So what are the main workload before COVID-19? As we can see, the main workload, or we call it as job demand, the Malaysian educator, or I believe across the globe, we are actually in charge of teaching. Alright, so teaching is not only to teach during the classroom, but the preparation usually takes time. And then, other than that, we have a lot of paperwork, be it kindergarten, primary school, or high school, or even tertiary education. We have a lot of paperwork to deal with. And other than that, the consultation. The consultation itself is not only aimed to the students, but also to the parents or anyone who need their address, their concern to be addressed. So the consultations over here is including the counseling part that an educator should do. So whenever the students, they face some challenges or difficulty or anything that they need help to, or they need understanding, that Malaysian educators, or I believe all educators, we should play our role to understand and to accompany and to help them. And that is a part of the job of the educators. And other than that, especially for higher learning institutions, they have to do their research in order to commercialize their research finding so as to bring it into practical that is to help to solve the problem which exists globally or even locally, then this research actually takes time and is actually creating the workload, or I would say the stress among the academician. And other than that, it is quite common that the publication has been listed as one of the promotion criteria among the academician. And a publication itself is not only count on the number, but also count on the quality. So that as an academician, local or private university or even colleges, they should publish their finding, their research into impactful journal bank. And knowing that impactful journal bank, they have a very high requirement in terms of significance and also in terms of contribution. And all these are all actually existing workloads of Malaysian educators. There are more yet to be listed here. So this is why we say that Malaysian educators, or I believe all educators across the globe, we are actually experiencing high job demand. But unfortunately, in the year of 2020 this year, we are actually impacted by the effects of COVID-19, and we need to go for online platform adaptation. Like what I said earlier, MCO start on 18 March, and the entire nation was informed on 16 March by the Prime Minister. So we have actually 2 days to get ready and prepared to move everything, especially delivery consultation, into online platform. So like I myself, I'm not ready for the change, but I have to go with the changes. So all the educators, they have to identify the online platform tools, then they have to learn, they have to explore, they have to adapt, or I would say they have to be skillful enough in order to deliver the effective lesson, as well as to guide the students to be engaged during the lesson. So with that, online platform adaptation has increased the job demand significantly. So with that, job demand can lead Malaysian educator, or I would say all educators, to experience burnout. And it is actually further supported by a theory named conservation of resources theory. It is said by Hopeful that an individual will be stressful when there is a possible loss of resources, or total loss of resources, or they can't gain back whatever resources that are lost. And if this condition persists, the individual tends to experience strain. And it is the work by Hopeful as well as Westman and a colleague at year 2005. So let me put it in a way, an individual tends to experience burnout if there is a possible loss of resources of theirs, or total loss, or whatever they have lost, they can't gain back again. So bringing this COR theory into the context of today's discussion, it can be understood as high job demand will lead to low job resources. Why? Because we need the resources to cope with the job demand. And with that, Malaysian educator will fight very hard to reserve resources, whatever resources they still have on hand, in order to deal with the remaining job demand or the concurrent job demand. And with these situations, the Malaysian educators, or all educators, are actually experiencing loss spiral. So basically, the high job demand is already happening before the COVID-19, and with COVID-19, it is even higher of job demand. And of course, the higher the job demand, the lower the job resources, because it has been used up. So the Malaysian educator, or all educator, they will fight very hard to reserve resources. So while it is losing, and they are still fighting to reserve the resources, and they are actually experiencing loss spiral. So it is supported by COR theory. So this is also actually mentioned by Hopeful at year 2001. So based on not only actually supported by the COR theory, it is also found by the past significant study that an individual tends to experience burnout when it is high job demand and there is a low job of resources. And I would say job demand and job resources, they happen at the same time, where high job demand require a lot of job resources to handle with. So with higher job demand, that will lead to a lower of job resources, and the individual tends to burn out. And it was found 19 years ago by Demarati and the colleagues. So as we can see, the problems that I have been discussing right now is actually supported by COR theory, as well as by the previous significant study that Malaysian educators are experiencing high job demand, or I would say higher, more, even higher job demand due to COVID-19 and then lead to their burnout. And it is supported by COR theory as well as the previous significant studies. So, first of all, what do we understand of burnout? Okay, in this context or in today's discussion. So burnout has been actually defined by Maslach and a colleague at year 1996 as a syndrome of emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced personal accomplishment. So all we can understand in an easier way is that burnout is a state of long suffering, and we are out of energy if we are burnt out, and we are exhausted as well as feeling low enthusiasm to the things that we like all the way. Then, like what I mentioned earlier, burnout is actually caused by high job demand. So in this context of today's discussion, job demand is actually advised to be separated into challenge demand as well as hindrance demands by Kavanaugh at year 2000. So challenge demand is actually referring to rewarding work experience that create personal growth. However, on the other hand, hindrance demand is the obstacle, or I would say barrier to personal growth that interfere with one's ability to achieve their value goals. So job demand should be separated because we can perceive challenge demand as a positive demand, whereas hindrance demand as a negative demand. So positive and negative demand features of the job demand, of course, they will lead to different outcome of the work performance among employee, or in our context is Malaysian educators. So with that, it is again, let's look through COR theory to say that when a person is failed to cope with higher job demand, or when the job demand is high, especially in COVID-19, then there will be have a tendency of reductions of resources, and the reductions of resources will lead to stress or emotional exhaustion, by Hopful in the year of 1989. And in the later year of 2002, Hopful mentioned that we should focus on other resources. If the existing resources are no longer helpful, then we should focus on other resources which to serve as stress counteractions or worry. So this is perfectly matching with the current situations where we have a new job demand on higher workload. We should focus on other resources so that the stress among Malaysian educator or even educator across the globe, their burnout level, the stress level can be addressed and decreased to the minimum level. So in today's discussion, the other resources that I would like to focus is actually PSC, or we name it as Psychosocial Safety Climate. Then first of all, what do we understand about PSC? It's actually a shared perceptions among employees regarding the policy, the practices, or the procedure in the workplace. Why? Because it is related to worker psychological health and well-being, or we name it as like a standard operation procedure in a education institution, be it kindergarten or primary school, even high school, or even private colleges, university, or local university. Or we can understand it in an easier way. PSC is actually a leading indicator for a better working environment. How does the better working environment is cultivated? It can be done through manageable job demand, or I would say feasible job demand. That it is achievable and something that can bring the education industry to a next higher level. So with that, if we have PSC, it is believed that PSC is able to reduce the negative implication of job demand. But in this context, I would like to differentiate job demand into challenge demand and hindrance demand. While challenge demand and hindrance demand are in the right position, it is able to reduce the burnout level among all educators. So based on the past study from the literature, it is found that PSC is having a significant positive relationship between for PSC on challenge demand. So recalling challenge demand act as a rewarding experience, or I would say positive job demand. So PSC is able to actually promote for the higher level of challenge demand. And it was found by Idris at year of 2015. On the other hand, PSC, which acts as an indicator, it is able to reduce the negative implications of hindrance demand. So let's recall hindrance demand is actually an obstacle or barrier or something negative job demand. So PSC is able to reduce the negative impact of hindrance demand. So therefore, with a good challenge demand to be increased and with the bad hindrance demand to be reduced, the burnout level among educators can be decreased. And it is also found by Abbas and Raja last year, it is having the significant relationship with burnout. Meanwhile, PSC itself also was found to have a negative significant direct relationship from PSC to burnout. That is to say, the higher the PSC in a learning institution, the lower the burnout among the educators. So as we can see over here, challenge demand and hindrance demand, they do possess certain impact of burnout. Alright? So however, it was found 6 years ago by ULITA that hindrance demand, they actually projected stronger effect on burnout. So that is to say, PSC, when it is able to reduce the level of hindrance demand, therefore, indirectly or directly, the burnout level also will be reduced significantly. Although challenge demand also a contributor to burnout, but it was found by ULITA that the effects on burnout is not really observable or is not really obvious. So with PSC increase the challenge demand, where it will actually increase the work engagement among educator, then the effect on the burnout can be said negligible. Therefore, our focus is here, the hindrance demand after being sorted out and it has been reduced by PSC, then it will reduce the level of burnout. So in conclusion, it can be said that higher psychosocial safety net, or we say PSC, it is able to increase the challenge demand among educator, as well as to lower down the hindrance demand among educator. And therefore, the burnout among educator can be lowered down or reduced. So to recap the entire discussion, we start with job demand. Job demand is all the time, or I would say all time, higher workload among educators across the globe. And because with the COVID-19, the job demand is even higher, or I will say overwhelming. And the job demand supported by serial theory or by the previous significant study is said that it will lead to burnout among Malaysian educators or all the educators. And based on the suggestion by Hopful at year 2002, other resources should be focused. And this other resource in this context for these discussions, I would like to focus on PSC, which serves as a stress counteraction memory. So with higher PSC, it is able to reduce the negative impact of job demand, as well as eventually reducing the lower level of job burnout among educators. So with that, with the minimum level of burnout, then we should observe quality teaching among the educator, as well as their job commitment or their work engagement among the educators. And also, what we have found indirectly, job demand can serve as a mediator. So job demand serve as mediator is a common thing in the literature. However, my context is to suggest job demand should be separated into challenge demand and hindrance demand to serve as the mediator. It is something still new and fresh that can be done in order to understand the mediation effects. So the implication of today's discussions is that it can be divided into theoretical as well as practical. So in terms of theoretical, it is actually contributing a lot in educational context. And based on my research, in terms of education in Malaysia, there is actually there are quite a lot of institutions, or I would say even higher learning institutions, they are yet to apply PSC, or they actually don't really look into the aspect of the PSC yet. So if we can apply PSC into the setting in all education level, then it will be very helpful in terms of work performance as well as their job burnout. Other than that, it is contributing in terms of differentiated into job demand. It is actually proven true in the literature that there are certain job demand which are very motivating, as well as there are certain job demand which is actually bring down the performance of the employee. So if we can sort out the job demand into challenge demand and hindrance demand, then we would like to promote the level of challenge demand, so as to promote for the personal growth among the educator, as well as to lower down the hindrance demand so that they are not exposed to something that demotivate them. And also, it is found in this study that new mediator can be done, where PSC can project its impact on the working environment, or we say the job demand, and based on the challenge demand and hindrance demand, which in the right position they will project the lower impact of the burnout level to be lowered down. So with new mediator, we can understand better how PSC is helpful to burnout. Meanwhile, for practical, it is helpful in terms of change of management practices. So if the management in terms of all education level, be it kindergarten, like one mentioned earlier, primary school, or even high school, or even higher learning institutions, if they can look into the indicator of PSC, then the management practices could be changed. And then there we will see the benefit of PSC is translated into practice. Second, we are more to focus on working condition if we focus on PSC in terms of management. Why? Because it is actually looking to improve the working condition as well as their job demand among educators. And also, relevant and suitable KPI can be plotted or can be established based on the suggestion or based on the indicator of PSC. So in future research or future directions that can be gain or that can be benefited from today's discussion is that we can actually have focused research. Okay, focused research in terms of the specialized research on different education level. So we understand that different education level among the Malaysian educators, they have different requirements, different KPI, they also have different job demands. So if we can do focused research, then we can better address different type of problem or different level of burnout among the educators. And also, it is suggested to combine PSC with other climates that we used to know. For example, we can combine PSC with safety climate because PSC is more concerning about psychological health, whereas safety climate is more carrying on the safety side of the employee. So if we can do combination or I would say integration, that will be a hybrid structure among PSC with other climate. Other than that, we can also build a more robust PSC. So the existing PSCs that we have now currently, they do not consider the external factors such as economical, technological, demographic, or even social forces. Therefore, PSC might not be so strong, or it can be influenced easily if there are the external factor which actually bring in the interruption. So if we can build a new PSC with the external factors, therefore PSC can play its role even effectively. And last but not least, it is advised to identify the antecedent of PSC. So based on the current or contemporary research, it is found that PSC serves as an independent variable which brings the impact on the mediator as well as the dependent variables. So that is yet to, there are yet to be found out in a current study. Is there any antecedent before PSC? So if we can work on it, maybe we have a better understanding or overall picture how to actually make PSC to be fully utilized in terms of the pictures of management or even in other manufacturing industry or even services industry. So if we can identify the antecedent of PSC, then we can actually manipulate PSC well, and therefore we can see the significant effect, especially on burnout or work performance. With that, that's all for my presentation today. Thank you.